So let's talk about the surprise movie for me, Don't Bother to Knock.
Right. I'd seen this about a year or two ago because Karina Longworth talks about it on You Must Remember This as being kind of an overlooked movie of Marilyn Monroe's. I
Yeah.
get to summarize it this time. Um,
I did okay once I was bad that one time and then I did better the other two times.
I mean, essentially, it's about, and again, spoilers for any movie we're talking about that involves Marilyn Monroe or zombies or anything like that. Um, Basically, Marilyn Monroe plays Nell,
Yeah.
who is a young woman who's, I think it's her fiance, died in the war, and
We don't learn that till later, but yeah.
we don't learn that till later, but she ends up babysitting someone in a hotel, babysitting a young kid in a hotel, and unfortunately kind of having a mental breakdown.
She's the niece of the elevator operator.
Yeah, and this comes with flirtations with a man who is kind of across the way, who she starts mistaking for her dead fiance.
It
And
becomes evident in those scenes that she's mentally unhinged, mentally
yeah, she's got
unstable.
mental illness issues.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's interesting to me. So it all takes place in a hotel, mostly in one hotel room. A very young Anne Bancroft plays,
I read somewhere this was her first role for
yeah,
Anne Bancroft.
plays like the hotel lounge singer who
Yeah.
is not a torch singer, but like a country western singer for some reason. And I really liked the way they could pump the stuff from the lounge. There was some kind of intercom system in the hotel room, so you could listen to Anne Bancroft singing down in the.
A neat little bit of historical knowledge we picked up there.
Yeah, I mean, you immediately saw it as a noir, which isn't wrong, but I immediately saw it as like Grand Hotel because I
Yeah.
really like the space that was created by having that intercom, so you'd have people, up above listening. Elisha Cook Jr., I forget his name. He played the elevator guy who was also Marilyn Monroe / Nell's uncle, who's the one who got her the babysitting gig. And, the elevator kind of connected everything. We saw reoccurring characters, a woman with a Dalmatian, this old couple who doesn't live, who are staying down below, who's kind of see what's going on, but they think they're seeing kind of nasty sex things they shouldn't be seeing, by which I mean like a young man and a young woman in a room together, because this is that era. And there's the parents of the girl. And so there's this kind of, I like stuff like that, where you have a whole cast of people who wouldn't be interacting if they weren't all in this hotel together.
Specifically to this point, so I want to say two things. One, because I've seen more noirs than you, because I watched the Colombian noirs in this, and I also just like noirs more than you do. This is a piece of noir history. There are just noirs that take place in hotels or in a single room. This is a thing they happen. It's not unique to the genre, even though it
Right.
really works in the case of this movie.
Yeah.
So that's one piece that's kind of interesting. But another thing is, right after the movie, I made this joke to you because I was a little bored with the one room we get to see mostly in Don't Bother to Knock, because there's one room and we get pieces of other
Yeah.
rooms a little bit. That in Asphalt Jungle, there was at least like 10 or so, 15 different rooms that we went between. And that was about, I mean, that's probably one of the only things, maybe the only thing I'll give Asphalt Jungle over Don't Bother to Knock. But what you're talking about is actually really why the movie feels bigger than one room.
Yeah.
Like it's like these different, like in Asphalt Jungle, it's the same five guys,
Yeah.
different configurations in 10 or 15 different rooms.
Mm-hmm.
In Don't Bother to Knock, it's one room with Marilyn Monroe in it, but then the uncle comes in and leaves. The Jed comes in and is there for a little while. The
Right.
parents are downstairs and they're sort of connected to everything, but they don't know what's going on. So there's this level of tension building by having all these different pieces, and we're not entirely sure how they're all going to meet.
Right. Totally. And the other thing I want to say before I really would ready to get into Marilyn's performance is that it's almost, I mean, I think it is a B movie, basically. To me, that appeals to me more than a John Huston film, apparently. But Like we had the guy who ends up being Thurston Howell the third on Gilligan's Island is a character. Elisha
James
Cook
Backus.
Jr., who's been in a million things.
Jim Backus, who was also in It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, which we watched semi-recently. He's the
Right.
pilot. He's the drunken pilot who doesn't fly the plane.
Willis Boucher, who I recognize from being in No Name on the Bullet, which is a B Western. So it's all
Right.
these like, you want to call them like working actors, like because
Yeah.
they're not Marilyn Monroe's, and Marilyn Monroe isn't Marilyn Monroe at this point either, and Anne Bancroft isn't Anne Bancroft yet at this point. So it's not like you don't have any stars in this movie, even though
Yeah.
Marilyn Monroe would go on to be one, Anne Bancroft would go on to be one. I don't know the guy who plays Jed, who is
Richard Widmark. He might, oddly enough, be the one who's least well known and has the least most.
He's familiar though. I don't know how famous he was at the time, or
he's like looking at his
have
credits.
a ton of movies before, and they're not really ones I recognize. So
no, but he's been in movies like Judgment at Nuremberg, 1961.
And
like
he's the one that plays the man that she mistakes for her dead fiance. So
right.
So we've talked a lot about B movies. I like this for not being the Grand Hotel. I like this for not having
right, and we
star-studded cast, for not having duchesses and rich people, for just being about some poor girl who's just probably has mental health issues to begin with, and then her fiance dies tragically, and her uncle. It's like the richest people in it are probably the parents of the
girl that she's watching,
or maybe the older couple, but like,
well, and we've talked about this right after we watched it, as we often do. We start getting into these half-hour long debates, and then Jill is like, what are you guys doing?
No, I made you stop last night because I was exhausted and I spilled milk all over my keyboard and just wanted to go to bed.
Yes, that was hilarious. Unfortunate, but hilarious. Well, and you pointed out, we both like B movies, but you definitely appreciate them more than I do. Like, a really good B movie to me is better than almost anything. But below that, there's a lot of movies that I don't necessarily appreciate the way that you do. And so, but like, I think you're right that like, and I'm stealing this out of Sarah's mouth, so everybody give credit to Sarah and not me, when I say that like, they tend to be able to do things bigger budget movies can't. That's one of the ways they get people interested, is by going off the beaten path.
Yeah.
I mean, that explains, a lot of horror movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, even, I think, something.
Stuart Gordon's entire career.
Basically, yeah. And so like and I think there's really and like sometimes they're not well done, and that can be annoying, and a B movie can still just be bad. And sometimes like a B movie turns into a bad good movie. Who knows? Yeah. But like, in the case of Don't Bother to Knock, it's an interesting kind of story that I'm getting a sense that people had more of a clue about the psychology of people than we give them credit for pre-2000s. Because like now there's a lot of interest in mental health that I feel like really has been, like, I don't feel it existed when I was even a teenager necessarily, 15, 20 years ago, when I was when I was a preteen and a teenager. But like, there was knowledge of this. It just felt like it was more of a fringe thing. Like, this is somebody with a mental health issue that is really interesting. She's not a villain.
Mm-hmm.
Not, there's a lot of humanity to her character.
Well, and that's what I thought was really interesting, because I was thinking about that when they cast Marilyn Monroe in the part of what could be a salacious horror film with a super sexy, crazy lady,
right?
Who might kill this kid. And that, I mean, certainly there have been those films of just like, I mean, I even briefly flashed on the it's the Michael Douglas, Glenn Close film where she's his mistress and like gets revenge on him. There's like,
True Romance or something, or
no, that's completely wrong.
Oh, excellent, good. I'm glad I was so wrong. I have true lies. No, I don't know.
Fatal Attraction is what
I'm thinking
of. But there are these like, I like crazy women movies, which I know is not the politically correct way to say it, but I'm not a big fan of like Fatal Attraction. It's but this one is done with such, Marilyn Monroe, it's hard not to feel for her, even when she's doing really off-putting things. And it was interesting how from almost the beginning, she was off-putting. And, you're watching Marilyn Monroe, who almost doesn't fit in this because she is so pretty. And she's not platinum blonde. She's definitely like, her hair is got darker shades in it, and it's very short.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like buzz cut or something, but it's pretty short.
Yeah.
And there's something, but then, so you want to just think that the weirdness is seeing like a young Marilyn Monroe in this part, but she's actually just being shifty-eyed and not quite meeting people's eyes. And then, there's just something off. And she's beautiful. And there's something interesting about taking such a beautiful person and having them be just having a mental break.
Well, we make the joke, they're the beautiful people in the movie, so of course they're going to fall in love, right? We make that joke about all these things we watch, and like, this is really a movie that's like, no, the beautiful person has a problem.
Yeah.
And that's something that's noteworthy. And
but there's like a motivation for her problem, but she also does things that are like really, like, she bashes her uncle over the head, she ties the little girl up, like, there's nothing cute about like, there's nothing like cutesy Marilyn Monroe about what she's doing. And the way it's shot and shown, it's still like sympathetic towards her and why she's doing that. And her character is a catalyst for the male character's growth, which is, what it is, at least the women. It's interesting because
it doesn't feel as icky as it often does. It is still a part of that problematic trope, but it doesn't feel.
But it's interesting because the reason he needs to grow is because his girlfriend dumped him very decisively, the Anne Bancroft character, whose name I can't pull up fast enough to say. And he needs to grow to get her back. And she's unrelenting and like, no, I don't want to be with you. And I don't want to be with you for this reason. And I don't think you're a good person, kind of, is what she says. Yeah. And so in a weird way, the Nell character, Marilyn Monroe character, is a catalyst for the man's growth so that he can prove himself worthy to another woman.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting.
After
the Asphalt Jungle, man, I was just happy to be happy to see a man need to prove himself to a woman for her to agree to take him back.
It has there's some tropes in there, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's not icky in the way that a lot of these movies are. It still has problems, but in terms of like maybe how we think of it, that kind of behavior and stuff. But it doesn't, and like how the story is told. But it doesn't, because he like, she isn't like pushing him to be a better person. It's more like Marilyn Monroe's character is on her own trajectory, and she's not doing it for him. He just happens to learn it.
Yeah.
Which is why it feels less. Which is why I think it feels less icky. And then it is all in the service of like being a better person and proving to this woman who has decisively shut him down, as you say, that he is worthy. And that also helps it feel less icky, because it's not like Anne Bancroft is like, oh my God, you've changed so much. She's like, she's happy about it, but like she's happy because he's done this good thing.
Right.
It feels more earned and genuine than it often does.
Right. Totally. And again, I guess I just want to make sure we cover her acting in it. But I mean, I was about to go for it.
Like, so I again, because I knew less about her until listening to You Must Remember This a few years ago, and even this month is really where I'm going to learn all this. But I remember thinking she was great in All About Eve, but otherwise mostly hearing that she wasn't a great actress. And that's just, watching this, I can say with confidence that is bullshit. Like, I was she was so good that I was actually disliking the movie. And then I was thinking about it and I'm like, why am I disliking this movie? Because Marilyn Monroe is icky? Because the character is icky? No, she's just doing too good at this. She's just doing.
She made you uncomfortable.
She made me so uncomfortable.
Someone who is
unstable. She's.
Well, it makes me even think of like David and Lisa, where a movie about two older teenagers, with one of whom they don't really ever label them. So let me not label them. But one of the things I like about that movie is that the kids are kind of unpleasant sometimes. Like, it turns out when
Yeah.
you have mental illness, I mean, also when you don't have mental illness, but they're
Well,
human beings, and human beings are unpleasant sometimes, regardless of whether they have mental illness or
right.
not.
And I
But
used to not.
definitely Nell is being, in her own efforts to grapple with the horrors of what she's been through, along with whatever is going on in her brain. Like, she does some really unpleasant things.
Right. Well, to the little girl, and it's like she's
Yeah.
probably traumatized the little girl, which is awful. But
Yeah.
it's not like it's not portrayed like any of that's good. It's more portrayed like this is just a tragic situation. Like
Yeah.
there's a humanity of like Nell's just a person who's had this happen. I wonder if, sometimes when a mentally unstable person is a villain in a movie for a while, and then there's numbers of tropes, but I think of like the trans killer or whatever, and that's like a mentally
Yeah.
unstable person, which is very problematic.
Right.
Or like somebody who's ugly, and
Right.
and it's like I wonder if there's more humanity because Marilyn is beautiful. I don't know, it doesn't matter ultimately, it kind of works,
But
even
it's
if that
interesting
is
because if you
why.
look at
But
Marilyn Monroe's own history, there's every chance that I mean, we're all pretty certain that she was abused at some point. She didn't
yeah.
have a dad. She definitely grew up kind of in being raised by a motley group of people and getting married at
Well,
an
yeah, she
extremely
went
young
into
age
the
when she didn't want to. And none of,
her own mother went into an institution, and then she was in the foster system, so she might even
right.
have.
And then eventually she overdosed on pills and died, and that's not the sign of someone who's doing well. And so it's
Yeah.
interesting that she has this early career part that
Yeah, it
such
was an
a
intention. We should say it seems to have been an intentional overdose. If you
uh,
can unintentionally overdose on pills, and that
was it
person,
an intentional? I thought it was unintentional.
I guess I thought it was intentional. Maybe I'm wrong though.
Who knows? But
Who knows?
well,
We'll figure out
we didn't
later.
re-listen to that episode.
No,
I
we'll
think it was
re-listen. We'll
I think it
find
was
out.
unintentional.
No, there you go.
But I mean, we talked about how All About Eve mirrors her kind of career drive in an interesting way, and I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about it until now. But Don't Bother to Knock kind of mirrors the tragic aspect of her, in a way
Yeah.
that
Well, and I need to bring this up now because we're sort of talking about how, Marilyn Monroe may have even been pulling on her own knowledge of her mother and some of the
Mhm,
situations she's been in with people, in her
mhm,
early life, based on what we know from You Must Remember This and general
mhm.
knowledge. But we watched a movie a while ago called David Holtzman's Diary, which is available, which we have on YouTube here. We talked about it. And I thought David Holtzman's Diary was a movie that was almost more relevant now than when it was made. And
Mhm.
weirdly, I think Don't Bother to Knock might be more of a movie for today's world than the world it was made in. Because it's
Yeah.
really, with our focus on mental illness issues, and, it's never specific what is wrong with Monroe. And you could probably talk to I don't know who, somebody who knows about mental illness, and they would be like, well, this isn't really how it would work. But the trauma was triggered by the death of someone she loved, and then she was in
Mhm.
an institution and never quite got better. And it's just so modern in that way, where because of how, I mean, I hate to say this really, but because of how humane and like there's an honesty to her and how she's acting, and like an honesty to how the other characters are trying to figure out what's going on, that just isn't always present in movies about mental illness
Right.
from an era prior to 2010s. Even, I would say,
Yeah.
it really depends, like, and there's nothing wrong, because sometimes, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having some of these movies that might be problematic. It's just that this movie, Don't Bother to Knock, really doesn't feel like there's a trope in it that like went
Yeah.
on to the future. Like, this isn't a part of a trope, and
Yeah.
there's no tropes from this movie that went on into the future. So
No, I mean that there is the deranged killer lady movies, that are much more horror films than this
yeah.
is. So,
Yeah. Well, my last points, since I think we're wrapping up, is that I was talking earlier about how there's these hotel room movies. I think this movie is kind of a good movie, maybe partially unintentionally. Like, Marilyn Monroe is really good in it. The dialogue is mostly good. The situation is mostly good. Again, as you say, there's all these characters, and that makes it feel bigger. But like, it really works that it's a one-room movie, because it's the whole point is it's kind of we're all in Marilyn's
yeah.
head and like how she's
Yeah.
behaving. So
Yeah.
unintentionally, by it being one of these kind of probably low budget, or at least made for less money noir movies really helps it. And then what was the other piece I was gonna cover? There's another aspect that I thought really worked for it, that really makes it work in this realm. I can't remember what it was, but like I think it's this weird, Marilyn Monroe has like her persona that she was cultivating, I think, is like she's just like innocent, and she's innocent, but like, and I forgot to say it earlier, but she's kind of sexual without knowing it. It's like that's what turns some men on, I guess, at least in this era and probably today. Like it's that like you're sexual but you don't know that you're sexual,
Right.
kind of like it's without meaning to be. And like there's an aspect of that to Monroe's character where she's innocent and she's kind of girly, but like she's still an adult. And there's something sort of, and like the weird way that the romance is kind of tied in with her, how she loved this man and he died. So like, and because of how she behaves and her voice and her character, that also really lends itself to this story. So I feel like it's an interesting story anyways, but it's one of these convergences of like just enough things are going right and they're sort of all clicking in this movie.
I was gonna say my last two things is, once I did babysit in a hotel room like that once. I think it was a much younger child, and it was like the friend of a friend thing. It's interesting how you do get those kind of jobs. I also babysat once during a wedding. I was part of like everyone dumped their kids, and in both of those cases, I barely did anything, and I did not change into anyone else's clothes and spill perfume everywhere. But
Excellent.
it is kind of a strange, isolating experience at the same time. So I there's some sympathy there. The other thing is,
I didn't know that.
to pull away from Marilyn for a minute, there's something to me intensely satisfying about seeing a man think that he's just going to have some good time with some pretty fun chick, and then like, if we're going to be deeply cynical, like realize that she is a person.
Yeah, totally.
And of course she's not your average person, because she's someone who's suffering in a way that most people don't suffer, but a fair number of people do suffer from. But there's something about that, seeing that experience depicted, and seeing it depicted to where he realizes that, like, she is a person and deserves sympathy, that like,
yes,
is satisfying.
Oh yeah, totally. You're totally right about all of this. There was one that did, however, remind me. My one critique of this movie is probably the last 30 to 90 seconds of the movie. I just like blew a raspberry at the screen.
Yeah, but that's like the end of Psycho. Psycho ends that way too, where it's like, fine. And by the way, like,
it's fine. It doesn't ruin the movie. It's just like, oh, right, this is from 1952 or whatever. You know?